Hello, we should be broadcasting. Great, people are appearing. Hello, people who are appearing. We're just gonna let this load and let people join, and we'll make a start in a minute. Hello, everyone who has joined so far. We're just going to wait another minute to let people join, and then we're going to get ready to start. Hello, Kathleen, saying hello in the chat. We're just going to wait for a couple more people, and then we'll get going. Thank you for the hair compliments. I don't know if everyone can see those, but people are being very friendly. We're just waiting a couple of minutes for a few more people to join. We have about 130 people who have signed up today, so we just want to give people a couple of minutes to log on. Hello, everyone. It is nice to hear who you all are and where you're coming from. Sophie, Fabrice, Heather, Holly. Hi. I think there is a mix of chat coming, some to us, some to everyone. I'm going to walk through the features and how we're going to use them in a minute when everyone's logged on. So we will get going in a minute. Okay, going to give you one more minute for people to join. You can see that we're at about 80 people. I'm just aware in case anyone's had any trouble with the link or things have come through a bit last minute. So we'll just give people another moment or so, and then we'll make a start. Okay, I am gonna make a start. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much to those of you who've said hello in the chat. I'm Lydia. I work for Lloyds Bank Foundation, and my role is to support charities to influence effectively. At this moment in time, it seemed like there was probably a need for people for some crisis comm support. So we are aware that all of you are almost certainly... oh, I've got someone here saying they cannot hear me.
I can hear you, Lydia.
You can hear me.
I'll reply to them. You carry on.
All right, thanks. So hopefully other people can hear me. So at Lloyds Bank Foundation, we have been checking in with charities over the last few days. Obviously, things have continued to shift and change. And much like all of you, we are working this out. We have not done this before, and we are trying to think about how, as a funder, we can be most helpful. We thought that probably doing some work around communicating in a crisis would be helpful. And we had more than 140 people indicate that they wanted to join today's webinar. So from that, we're hoping that this is useful. And the format for today's webinar is, I'm just going to sort of like talk us through some of the technical features and how that's going to work and how we can interact with each other. Obviously, there are a lot of us, so it's going to be a lot of us talking, but we are going to try and have moments where you can interact with us and that this can be a bit friendlier because we're working this out together. I should say that both for Kat and I, this is our first time doing a webinar using Zoom, so bear with us if we struggle with the tech at any point. This is the perfect time to learn how to use technology because everyone is learning at the same time. And Kat's going to take us through some of her sort of like top tips and tricks, having been involved in communication support for a long time, particularly recently working with Grenfell United, and so some understanding of when life stops being normal and things are disrupted and how do you respond to that, though of course we recognise that all of this is new to all of us. And then at the end we're going to spend some time talking about what we are going to be doing as a foundation, or what we're hoping to do, and asking you to share with us some of your priorities. We turn this webinar around in 4 days. We can definitely turn more stuff around quickly if this kind of format is useful. So we will be coming back to you. So in terms of features and how this is going to work, we are going to ask you to, if you want to communicate with us, write in the chat, and hopefully one of us will reply. We've got my colleague Helen is on here at the moment to try and help with any technical problems, so hopefully that will work. I can see that a couple of you are having problems with sound, so when you joined you should have been prompted to join with computer sound, and if that didn't happen, feel free to, you might need to sign out and sign back in again and select that. For other people, we're going to ask you to communicate using the function on the participants function. We know there isn't, it might give you an option to raise a hand at the bottom of the screen, but we're going to ask you if you've got something to say to do it in chat, and Helen's going to be monitoring the chat, just because of the sheer number of you and trying to make this format work as quickly as possible. Kat, have I forgotten anything on the technical stuff?
No, that's
we're
great.
Recording this.
I think great. Just on the chat, great. if you select the option to send your message, if you've got a comment about about the workshop as we're going through, or extra tips to throw in, if you select to all panelists and attendees, it just means everyone can kind of see and we can feel that we're all participating together. If you've got a tech question, just send it to the panelists. And
we'll try and address that. Thanks very much. In which case, I'm going to stop talking. Thanks again for your time. I'm going to pass over to Kat, who's going to take us through some thinking about moving from crisis to action.
Cool, thanks Lydia. And I just saw a question there. You can use the Q&A function if you've got a question. We're going to try and do some Q&A at the end, so we might park that and then try and go through as many questions as we can at the end, and just participate in the chat. It's very weird not to be able to see everyone's faces, so I do love a bit of feedback, and so feel free to keep chatting. So first of all, please, some of you have already, please say hi in the chat. Tell us where in the country you're from and what your organisation is. It's really great to see so many different people. I've seen women's centres clicking on, we've got refugee charities clicking on, lots of different people. Hi Sam. So feel free, take a moment as you can, introduce yourself in the chat. Hi ActionAid, Bristol's Refugee Rights, HIV Charity in Bristol, Lloyds Bank Foundation, Latin America Women's Rights Resource Centre, So many people clicking in here. Little Village HQ, I follow you on Twitter. It's great to have you. Thank you so much. Keep sharing who you are. And I think hopefully people can just see so many small charities out there doing amazing work at the moment, but also all looking for support and help. So hopefully this webinar, along with a lot of resources that we can share after and online, are going to help some of your questions. Just a little bit about me before we kick off. So I run a small team called Chorus Campaigns, and we're communications and campaign strategists, but we focus on working with grassroots or community organisations. We spent the last couple of years working with the bereaved families and survivors from Grenfell United, and before that I was campaigns director at change.org, so worked on a lot of breaking news stories, a lot of fast moving issues and stories. So I'm used to kind of crazy media, overwhelming media moments and times. But what I would say is this moment is very unique, and none of us have lived through this before, and we're all learning as we go. So this presentation is sort of tips and tricks of what I've found helpful in very overwhelming times. Take from it what's helpful, ignore what's not helpful to you right now. And I think over the weeks and months, we all need to support each other, share what we're learning and help each other, because none of us have ever been through this before, and we're learning very much as we go. So for this session, I think with crisis comms, there's kind of 3 themes that are going to come through this session. The first is clarity. You really need to have clarity about what you're trying to communicate and why. So we're going to look a bit about that. Who you're trying to communicate to, so your audience and your channels. And then you need to think about how you're going to cut through the noise to be heard. So those themes will come up in the session. And our plan is we're going to take a moment to look at the moment that we're in. What does it feel like? What does it mean for our work? We're then going to do a little bit of getting organized, and I'd really encourage you to have your notebook out and use this hour to be doing some of this work as we go. So fill in the questions that I'll be asking you for yourself. Then we're going to look at 3 things: communicating with your team, communicating with decision makers, communicating with supporters. That will include a bit of media and press too. It's a lot to cover, so it's going to be quite top line and top tips. And at the end of the presentation, if there's areas that you want more on, if you want another session to go deeper into some of these areas, we'll be asking that question and we'll see what we can do to help. And someone's asking, yeah, I'm happy to share slides. I'm happy to share a kind of PDF of the top bullet points from the presentation that you can take away. So I think get your notebooks out, write what's helpful for you, and maybe work along as you go through this session. But I will share, so don't worry about, copying everything down. So we're going to start on the content now. Step 1 of crisis comms is to take a deep breath. So before we go any further, everyone just take 3 deep breaths. Okay. So overwhelm is very normal in these situations, and it's okay. It's a very, very normal feeling. And what we're going to talk about in this session is, yes, comms responses, but also techniques to try and contain the overwhelm. And breathing is the first one of those. So thinking about the moment that we're in, please put in the chat if any of these resonate with you, or if there's any more that you would add to this list. But the moment that we're in, it can feel like a whirlwind. Everything's up in the air and racing ahead. There's lots of offers for help, but that help isn't always the right help, and sometimes can kind of be more overwhelming. There are so many urgent needs. It's quite hard to figure out what can wait and what has to happen, because so much feels urgent. Quite often you've got fears about now and also fears about the future. And for small charities, there's huge demand on your time, but at the same time of uncertainty for staff and volunteers. And there's also a lack of trust and lots of different disinformation going around. So this is some of the stuff that we're dealing with in this moment. But on the flip side, it's also important to kind of think about what is out there that's helpful. There are a lot of people that want to help, and we've seen so many community groups pop up in this moment. There's a rise of community and a real sense that actually community, small charities, community groups really matter in this moment. there's a chance for a new normal. So much stuff is happening from councils and governments who are responding to this emergency and having to do stuff that, you know, we would be lobbying for years. So there's a chance for a new normal in this. And we also all need each other. So it's about supporting each other as best we can. So whenever you feel that overwhelm, always think about the positive side and what is out there to help. So getting organized in this moment of chaos that we're in, this is step one to any good comms. You need some sense of clarity, and it's been really difficult for us all in the last few weeks to try and get clarity. So as a small organization, a few tips to kind of reprioritize for this moment would be things you can do. And you know, use your notebook at home to go through these as you go, if that's helpful. But your charity objectives, go back to basics. Out of those, what is most relevant right now in this moment? Think about, what do your service users need in this moment? Think about what it is that you uniquely do in this moment, and what can be put to one side for now and maybe have to come back to later. It's really important just to take that deep breath and to try and prioritize, and to try and really think about, in this moment you're in, what it is that you uniquely do. And it's a moment to look for partners or other organizations that are offering other support that you can signpost to. So really thinking about 1 to 3 things that you can focus on. You're not going to be able to achieve sort of 10, 15 things in this moment. So really hone down and look for others that can offer the support where you can't. You can always pivot later down the line, but it's important to really try, if you can, to get some clarity about your objectives in this moment. With Grenfell United, in the days after the fire, when the group that formed Grenfell United got together, they had 3 priorities: to look after the immediate humanitarian need for their families, so where they were going to live that night, you know, that side of stuff, to make sure that the charity funds that were being raised were getting to the right people, and then looking at justice and change. And those 3 priorities that we put down in the early days, they have been steadfast for us throughout, and whenever we've got spun off course, we've come back to those. You can pivot if you need to. If you choose the wrong thing in a few months, you can change, but try and focus. It's going to be the best thing to help you right now, to really think what it is that you uniquely and usefully can do to help, and to resist the savior mode. If you're a campaigner or an activist, we have this inclination to want to help everyone. This is a national crisis, and we need every single organization to do what they uniquely and usefully do best, and trust that others are doing the same. And that's how we'll get through this. So take a moment, if you haven't already done so in the last week, to really think about what your priorities can be and how you can focus them in your moment. Okay, I'm just going to pause there for a minute. Okay, so once you've got your priorities, how are you communicating that to the different layers that you need to communicate it to staff, then to supporters, funders, etc. Firstly, communicating with staff. There are 2 things that I would say. One is choose your channels, stick to them. And then the second one is to choose to build trust through rhythm, ritual, and respect. And we'll talk about what those mean. So with channels, there's free channels and then there's paid for channels. My suggestion is you have one chat channel where people can kind of message and see each other, and a video channel if you can for that connection. Obviously WhatsApp, I'm using it all the time right now. Caveat that if that's on your personal phones for staff, you might want to think about that over time, because people do need a time to be able to switch off. Whereby, if you haven't heard of it, it's a good video chat. It's a kind of like a free version of Zoom like we're using now. So it's good for kind of video chatting and group chat. There's also, if you do have a bit of budget or your funders are going to support you, you might want to look at Slack, which is an alternative to WhatsApp for chatting, or Zoom that we're using now. And a few things on this. One is about making sure that you people know how to use this. You know, not everyone is very tech savvy, so this might be the time that you want to buddy up people that are quite tech savvy and check that all your staff really know how to engage with this. Otherwise they won't be talking to you how they should. Make sure people have the right kit that they need to use it, and I do think now is a good time to ask for funders on kit. I've spoken to Yeah, Skype is great as well. Someone's asking in there, especially for like video chats and so on. Now is a good time, if you don't have the kit you need to get your staff working at home, to talk to funders about that. I know Lloyds are looking at what they can do, and I've heard a lot of other funders say that they understand that getting charities set up digitally and to be able to do their service digitally is really important in this moment. So think about the channels you want to use, and speak to funders if you don't have the right kit for that. Someone in the chat's usefully saying that Microsoft Teams, if you have a Microsoft email address, you can use chat and video on Microsoft Teams as well. So thanks for that. But pick your channels and stick to them, because what you don't want is too many incoming different channels that you have to check. I don't use Twitter DMs. I've turned, when I'm in a media crisis, I don't have voice answer phone on my mobile. It's a text or it's an email, and it's WhatsApp to communicate with my team. Okay, so rituals, rhythm and respect. What do I mean by that? Rituals in this moment are really important to build connection and community with your team. This is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. So how in this moment, when we're not physically with each other, can we stay connected to each other? Rituals matter here. It can be little things like, we're going to do a call at 10 a.m. to check everyone's got dressed. Or after the weekend, we're going to send a picture of what we did over, something interesting we did over the weekend, something we cooked, or the walk that we went on. At the end of the week, we're going to have a ritual where we get to shout out amazing volunteers. We'll say thank you to people. These little rituals are what's going to keep us connected to each other over time. And it might seem frivolous, but it's going to be really important as the weeks go on. Rhythm, routine really matters in this moment. So it gives people that sense of security, especially when things are a bit crazy. So what is your routine going to be? When are you going to check in with staff? When are you going to share information? When are you going to do your calls? As much as you can, try and build a routine, because that is going to give people a sense of security, and they're going to know they're going to get the right information at the right time. And lastly, respect. This is really important for any kind of community building, but also for your staff team. I think this is a time to build in some new values, remembering that staff are going to have needs in this situation. We're all dealing with things personally. Grief is going to be something that comes up over the months ahead. With the groups that I've worked with over the last few years dealing with grief, we've had a sort of second language where it's been okay when someone's just said, I have to take some time out right now. I need a week with my family. Understanding that things like this can come in waves. And so what language and what leadership are you going to use to make it okay that people can communicate what they need? And if they do need to step away from something for a time, how are we going to support them to do that? I appreciate that's really difficult if you're a small charity, but we have to hold each other in this moment and make space for that. Also with kind of respect, setting boundaries is really important. And this is where this presentation might differ from like a corporate comms type presentation. But I think boundaries in this moment are incredibly important. So think about what they are for you. You cannot show up and help other people if you are not in a good place yourself. So things like when you're using WhatsApp, if you're using that for a tool to use, what are the ground rules? This WhatsApp chat is for this type of information. We're going to use it during working hours. Please don't post after working hours. We're going to use this chat for emergencies outside working hours. Just how can you respect each other and put those rules in place that you need? Be clear on the ways people can ask for support if they need it, if they need some time off, if they have a family situation, or if they're unwell. Be clear on where people can communicate that and get that support. And then my last tip on setting boundaries is to control the incoming information as much as you can. If you haven't already set an out of office, set one. It doesn't have to be an out of office to say you're not responding to stuff. It's a really useful way to say, as an organisation in this moment, these are our priorities. If you have got in touch with us about these, we will get back to you as soon as we can. We might be a bit slower compared to normal, but we're doing our best. If your query is about X, Y, and Z, here's some other places that you can go to get that support. And it just means that when you go into your inbox, rather than being overwhelmed with the incoming information, what you can do is look through it and respond to things that match your priorities as best you can. And you know that people are getting some kind of response from you, that you're of how you're dealing with this situation straight away. So really use things like your out of office, really pick the channels from which you're going to communicate with people on. I don't use answer phone when I'm working on a big busy media crisis. My answer phone says, if you've called this, please text me, because I know I'm not going to have time to listen to all my answer phone messages. So just have a think to how you can kind of set some boundaries. Speak to your team about the boundaries that you're going to set as a team to look after each other in this, and try to hold each other accountable to those. Okay, so that's kind of like team stuff, office stuff, staff stuff. Now let's start to look a little bit outwards. I'm just going to pause for a moment as well, just to let us all catch our breath. Okay, so communicating with decision makers in this moment. And that can mean, decision makers can mean anyone from your local MP, your council, it could mean, you know, your mayor, it could mean the government. This section is kind of quite short and punchy, and I just wanted to share like a few top tips that are maybe different from how you've communicated with decision makers in the past. There's a lot more we could say on this section if it's something that is of interest later. So first of all, you need to have a really clear ask that has the need and the urgency. And later on in this training, we're going to come back to what a clear ask looks like. I would say that this is the time to join forces and to find partners. So if you're a women's rights organisation that's trying to raise an issue that's affecting the women that you look after, who are the other organisations trying to raise that same issue? How can you work together to amplify that asks? This is a moment where you really need to demonstrate the need, and to get that cut through, it's going to help to work together. So I think in this moment, times of kind of competition or just times where maybe you've worked with a partner and it hasn't gone so well, just put that to one side. It's times to try again. So really think about who you can join forces with to raise the issues that your vulnerable groups are facing as loudly as possible. Number 3 is about finding your people on the inside. Now, I'm a campaigner and I throw stones at organisations and government and council, and that's what I do day to day. But in this moment, it sometimes is a moment to actually try and work with those institutions to find solutions, because suddenly the rules of the game have changed and we need to all see each other as a community that's trying to find solutions. Find people on the inside that you could work with. Okay, so at Grenfell, the families that I work with made a decision after the fire that they would sit down with Kensington and Chelsea Council, because they needed to be able to get survivors hotel rooms, to be able to get bereaved families the support they needed. Now that council, they are still holding to account for what it did to them. But in that moment, they knew unless they found a way to work together and communicate, they wouldn't get what was needed. So if families in that situation can kind of focus on prioritizing what's needed and sit across the table from them, we all need to think about how we do that in our day-to-day work. And people that we've maybe normally campaigning against, start thinking about how we can work together to find solutions. Doesn't mean not calling out what's not happening. It doesn't mean not raising what vulnerable people need. It doesn't mean that in a year's time we're not going to be asking these questions to hold people accountable that we're decision makers in this period. But right now we need to try and find some solutions together. And there will be people in these institutions that you can build relationships that want to do the right thing. So try and find them. And then lastly, in terms of contacting decision makers, think about the influencers and amplifiers, councillors, mayors, local MPs, other national charities that work in your space. Contact these people and try and tell them what you need and what you're asking for, and see if they can help amplify you. So I just want to give like a really quick example of some of the stuff that I was talking about. So obviously the needs of homeless people has been raised a lot over the last few weeks, and you see some press coverage on the left of the screen here around charities coming together to talk about homelessness need to be seen as a particular vulnerable need at this time. There's petitions and so on taking off. So people are trying to come together, highlight this need. And on the other side of the screen, we see a tweet from Tom Copley, who's Deputy Mayor for Housing at City Hall, saying City Hall are looking for hotel rooms that they can block book for homeless people. So we see people in institutions changing how they're working and trying to find solutions together. And then underneath that, there's an article about how a hotel group has come forward to help people. So this just shows you how things can change really quickly, and people in institutions that normally don't respond or maybe don't listen to us will listen to us, so and try and find solutions together. So it might be a time just to think about how you're engaging with decision makers in the council, and make sure that you're really getting your case across, but you're also working with them to think of some solutions. Okay. We're going to now look at galvanizing supporters and volunteers and sort of more traditional comm stuff. I just wanted to kind of give you a sense of having priorities, setting some boundaries, think about how you're engaging with decision makers. Those three things are going to kind of help you as you go forward. Feel free to keep commenting in the chat. It is nice to kind of see people are still with us, and I hope you're finding this useful. We've got 105 participants, so I'm trying not to freak out about that. Okay, so next section, galvanizing supporters and volunteers. Okay, in this moment as a small charity, there is a lot going on for you. One thing to always remember is that people want to help, and you need to tell people what help you need. Okay, they're often in these situations, people are throwing help at you, but it might not be the help that you need. Or there's people out there that would help you, unusual people, businesses, local businesses, etc., that want to help, want to be useful in this moment, but they don't know what's needed. So as a charity, when you've got your priorities straight, let people know what help you need, and we're going to look at how you do that right now. Thanks for the comments, making notes, etc. It's good to know people are following along. Thank you. So some examples of people asking for help in this moment. The Trestle Trusts have been crowdfunding for their food banks. Even organisations like the Hay Festival, arts festivals, are crowdfunding to try and help their employees. So businesses are crowdfunding to try to keep welfare going for their employees right now. So if that's happening, as charities, you can completely be asking for help in this moment. I've put up examples of Bloody Good Period, who are great, local deli in Soho that crowdfunded £11,000, I think £20,000 now, to get supplies out to axed JobKeepers. So a lot of people are out there asking for help, and you can too. I know a lot of people are struggling at home in this moment, but there are also people who are in a situation where they are able to help, and they want to. Okay, so how do you ask for help, and also how do you cut through the noise when so many people are doing the same thing? So this next 5 points around asking for help, you can use this model for how to write a crowdfunder kind of description. You can use this model for how to send an email detailing what you need to supporters that are on your list, or to a funder. This is also would be the framework for how you tell a story to a journalist or the media. So these 5 steps can help you in all of those different kind of communication channels. And we're going to go through them one by one. And again, like I said at the start, feel free to do this for yourself as we go through this. Use your own examples, and then you can tidy it up after the call. So the 5 steps, and we'll go through these all together. 1 is to set the scene. 2, outline the urgency and the opportunity. In the campaigning world, we often talk about the crisitunity. So yes, the crisis, but you need to show there's an opportunity to make it better. 3, be very tangible and specific about what you need people to do. 4, show how that action is going to make a difference. And 5, make the ask and include the link, and only ever ask for one thing at a time. Too many options can be overwhelming for people. So let's go through each of these one by one. And please do, if you've got an example that you've been working through at home, this is the time to kind of work through it together. So set the scene. Now, obviously, we're all dealing with the same crisis, but specifically for you, how has coronavirus affected your work? Are people that you work with at risk? What is the particular risk they're facing? Are you doing more than usual in this moment to help? Is there more that you need to be able to provide your normal services? Have you lost funding? So be honest about how the coronavirus is affecting your specific work, and set the scene for people. That should just be a couple of sentences. Can't make it too long, but just be honest and direct. 2, outlining the urgency and the opportunity, or the crisis-opportunity. Okay, who is at risk? And also, what is the opportunity to make a difference? So be as specific as you can be. I saw some great communications from Bloody Good Period over the last week, simply saying periods don't stop in a pandemic. We need to get supplies out to these groups as soon as we can. So just being very detailed about what the crisis is and the opportunity is. I've seen some great work as well from domestic violence charities, really highlighting why in this moment there is such an increased risk, and the need for more refuge spaces, and for the government to really seriously think about how they're supporting women in this moment, or other victims of domestic violence. So the urgency and the opportunity, if you can. Be tangible and specific about what you need. We need to raise £2,500 to do what? We need 10 volunteers with this experience. We need local taxi drivers to help deliver goods. We need 1,000 signatures on this petition so that we can take it to the council. So just be very tangible and real about what you need, which links to the next point, is show how action is going to make a difference. If we get this funding, we can help this many people. If we can get 10 laptops to our team, we're going to be able to run our helpline service from home. So just being very specific and tangible about how the action is going to make a difference. And it can be small things or it can be big things. And then include a link of how people can help you, whether that's donating to the crowdfunder, whether that's, contacting the right email address to volunteer or provide help. So I'm just going to go back and show that list again. Set the scene, outline the urgency and the opportunity, be tangible and specific about what you need, show how their action will make a difference, and include the link. And if you follow any campaigning organisations like 38 Degrees or Change.org or Shelter or Greenpeace, you will see their emails follow this very simple pattern, time in and time out. So let me give you an example. This is a store that has been crowdfunding to get meals out to workers that have been made redundant. They've raised over £20,000. And this is from their crowdfunding page. So it's got a very clear ask at the top. Free food for Londoners in need from their stores. It sets the scene really clearly. Lena Stores has been making fresh homemade pasta and Italian sauces in London since 1994. Your support will help us provide emergency food kits consisting of fresh made pasta and sauces that will be given free to hospitality staff who has been made redundant during the public health crisis. So it's very clear what they're trying to do, very clear who they're trying to help, very clear why that need exists. And then they get very specific about where the money is going to go: fresh ingredients, packaging, staff to produce the foods. And further down on the page, they have with this much money, we can achieve this much. So I think this crowdfunder has cut through the noise because it's very clear, it's very specific, it's focused on what they're good at doing and what they're able to do and they're trusted to do, and they're asking very clearly for what they need to do it. So think about that checklist and the priorities. And you'll see this with crowdfunders or campaigns that are going to take off in this period. Being very specific is going to be really important. So I'm just going to put this up for one more minute and then we will move on to the next section. And again, like I said, you can use this template for even if you're emailing funders for support. Writing the email clearly and like this is going to really help the funder see why you need that support. If you are emailing your supporters, if you have any supporters on an email list already that have supported your charity in different ways, this is the time to use that email list and email them clearly what you need with a link to how they can help or donate or volunteer. Don't be afraid to send multiple emails over the next few days. People actually don't mind hearing from you, especially in this moment. They know people need help. So please use your channels, use the email list and the support that you have. Okay, let's move on to the next section. So getting the message out there. Okay, so you've got your priorities. You know what you need to ask, what help you need to ask for. Who is your audience? Is it funders? Is it supporters? Is it the general public? One thing I would say is that you don't have to communicate with everyone. There's been times, particularly doing the Grenfell story, where I've ignored a lot of media requests because in that moment we were focused on a very specific need and we were quite overwhelmed. So we had to just focus on that need. You don't have to communicate with everyone. You have to communicate with the people that are most going to help you with what you need in that moment. So have a think about that. If it's the general public, I would break that down a bit more. Who is most likely to help you in the general public? Right now, I think people are looking locally to see how they can help in their local area. So think about contact, people in your local area and local media, which we'll come on to, or people that have supported similar initiatives. If you're a women's rights organisation on Facebook, who are the similar, people that support women's rights groups? So try and draw out some characteristics. Then how can you reach them directly? I've said this before, I will keep saying it. Email, email, email. If you have an email list of people that have supported your charity, now is the time to use it. Don't be afraid to use it daily for a few days. 4 or 5 emails over the next couple of 3-4 days is okay, as long as you are giving clear information, direct information, and you're telling people this is what we're asking for, and then tell people this is what's going on now. Thanks to your donations, we've been able to do X and Y. People want to hear, and they have more of a tolerance for receiving emails than you think. So use that. It's your best tool to access people really directly that are supporting you. Simple calls to action on social media. Also, I would think about other platforms that, if you have a small audience, are there other platforms or organizations that have a big audience right now? So for example, if you get your crowdfunder on GoFundMe, reach out to the GoFundMe team, tell them it's on there, see if they're able to promote it on any of their channels. If you're working in a local area, are there local businesses that have email lists of customers that you could contact and say, hey, if you could put our ask on an email to your customers, it's going to make a huge difference for us. So get creative about people that have channels that maybe the best thing they could do to help you in this moment is to help share your messaging through that. And I know local businesses are trying their best to be useful right now. That's something you can do. I've just seen a question about, is email preferable to calls? I think it just really depends. I do think email is a great way to reach a large number of people very quickly and directly. The link is there for what they need to do. So when they're ready to click the link, they can do that. If you've got a smaller list, or you've got you're used to doing calls and fundraising calls, that's something your charity is set up for, then I think feel free to definitely do that, and maybe you do a bit of both. I'm not a kind of a fundraising call expert, but I do think that using both channels is okay. Obviously be respectful that people are dealing with a lot right now on their phones. Who can amplify? So also, when you've got your ask, who can amplify it? Could your funders amplify some of your asks for you? Any businesses or corporations or charity partnerships that you've had, ask them to amplify it. Media, we're going to talk about in a minute. And also think about reaching out to local influencers, especially on Twitter or Instagram. It's a great way to tag someone local and say, hey, we're a local charity, could you give us a bit of an amplifiers in this moment? I think right now people don't mind being asked for help. They know lots of groups, especially small charities, are so important in this moment. So don't be shy about asking for that help. Okay, we're going to take another quick pause, and then we're going to dive into a few media tips. Okay, so reaching the media in this moment. Now, there's a lot we can get into around, great pitching and interviews. We're not going to go all the way to that level of detail in this call. We're going to just keep it really simple and really basic, some top line stuff to think about. So if you were going through your priorities and kind of reaching the general public was something that was important for your ask, then you want to think about using the media. If actually that's not what you need to be doing right now, and what you need to be doing right now is making sure your funders know what you're doing and are funding you so you can do it, don't worry about not contacting the media. Just get your head down and do what you need to do in the moment. Okay, but if you do want to reach the media, then this is a few tips. I think there are 4 stories the media are looking for right now, especially from local charities. Now, obviously, you've got the kind of big politics story that we're seeing every day about what the big updates are and what's going on with the virus broadly. But there are 4 types of stories that as local charities and smaller groups you have access to that the media are really looking for right now. One is stories about overlooked or vulnerable groups. One is stories about data, and now that's big data but also small data. If you have information that there has been there are this many homeless people in your area that are at risk, that's an interesting piece of information to have. If you have data about how your domestic violence helpline has surged in calls over the last week and is getting 50% more calls, that's a piece of data that's useful. So think small. If you have information about how many refugees or migrants are struggling in your area, or calls to your helpline, these pieces of data are useful and interesting to journalists, especially locally. So think about those kind of data stories that can demonstrate your need. Journalists are also looking for stories of community and hope, and you're going to see that more and more and more. That mix of, yes, talking about the crisis and what's needed, but also needing to demonstrate community and hope. And as small charities, if you are working especially with volunteers or in the work that you do, you are part of that story of hope and community, of being there for people in need. So think about also framing your stories in that sense. How many volunteers have come to you and mobilized? Do you have an incredible story of someone that's in your charity that is going above and beyond right now to help? And people are also looking for personal stories, interesting personal stories of people that have overcome adversity to help. It could be, even your staff, why you set up the charity and what you're doing in this moment. So think about these 4 areas, and I bet you have some incredible stories to tell, more so than some of the big national organizations that can kind of only really do the big data and the politics stories. You are on the ground and you have access to these stories. And it might seem that there's only one story on the news right now around coronavirus, but actually there is so much space that journalists are needing to fill. So if you're helping with the issue locally, think about the stories you have. Let me give you a few examples of those kind of stories. So overlooked or vulnerable groups, I've seen stories about over 70s being stuck at home. ITV's London's been featuring them a lot of stories about homeless people, even stories about like students. So thinking about the different groups affected and telling their story. There's a huge amount of data stories. Like I said, for small charities, it's thinking about this local data that you have that demonstrates the need. And then also stories of community and hope. So the choirs that are popping up. I've seen BBC Local Radio. If you go to BBC Local Radio online and look for Make a Difference, they are actively asking for people to contact them about stories of hope and in their community and community work that's happening. They have a set time every day where local radio are going to feature these stories. So get in touch with them. And then also personal stories, interesting personal stories. So this is a story here about a girl living with cancer and how she's had to deal with self-isolation, looking after herself. So think about those personal stories, and this was front page of the Times website today. So personal stories can really cut through this as well. So thinking about your stories in these ways really matter. And then reaching out to journalists, okay? Also, on the image here is also on the Guardian website. They have a section called Anywhere But Westminster, and they have put out a call again for people in local areas to contact them and tell them how they're dealing with coronavirus locally. So there's a lot of asks for local charities to get in touch. So really look out for those, respond to them. Journalists want to hear from you and want to hear what's going on in your area. Okay, so reaching out to journalists in this time, here's my 3 tips. And again, we can talk more in the Q&As about pitching if that's helpful. But the top tips are, in this moment, go local. Find local journalists for your local ITV News, your local BBC News, your local radio, local papers. Find them on Twitter. Quite a lot of them will have their email address and how to contact them in their bio. So use that or tweet them. If you can't figure out which journalist to contact, then go via like news desk emails that are usually on the websites. But go local. This is how you're going to get cut through. And if your story is good locally, quite often that will get pushed up into the national agenda. But right now, people are really connecting with what's going on in their area. When you reach out to a journalist, whether it's over email or whether you pick up the phone to them or Twitter DM, however you're doing it, keep it really, really simple. Who are you? What are you doing? When is something happening? Is it happening now? Where is it happening? And how can they contact you if they're interested in following up on this story? So just your what, when, where, who, and your contact. So that might be, you know, we're a small charity operating in this area. We are providing, you know, care packages to this group of people who we know are particularly vulnerable. And we want to connect you with, you know, 3 amazing volunteers that have stepped up in this time. Or we want to connect you to a chief executive who's able to talk about how this vulnerable group are being overlooked right now in this crisis and what we're doing to support them in our local area. So just very simple and direct. And my 3rd tip is do not write a press release. I've been doing big national media stories for many years and I can't remember the last time I wrote a press release. It's too much work. You don't need a press release in this moment. You just need a couple of paragraphs in an email with those simple what, when, where, who, and your contact info. And keep it really, really simple in this moment. Journalists just want to know what's the story, who can they speak to about it, and why it's relevant to them. So just keep it really simple and don't ditch the press release. Just go for very simple, basic comms right now, very direct, and think local. Local media is going to be what helps you in this moment. Okay, so that is a quick whirlwind of media stuff. I hope that it's not been too intense. Just 2 more things that I just wanted to say before I hand back to Lydia, and I will do some questions. First of all, is hope really matters in this moment, and there are going to be a lot of organisations out there asking for help and highlighting the crises that we face across the country. That matters, but hope also matters too. And when you're doing good comms in this situation, sharing stories of hope is going to boost morale and bring people back to you. So Bloody Good Period, who I mentioned before, are very good at this. They report back good news and they say thank you. And you see that across their social media channels. It's reflected in the emails that they send to supporters too. So for example, you know, they got 1,000 packs of pads out to people that need them. They shared that news back with their supporters. They also do big shout outs to volunteers that have been helping. So in this time of crisis, after you've asked for help and pushed for help, make sure you're telling people thank you. You know, even if it's as simple as 10 people donated £10 and now we've got £100 to buy the kit we need, or we've managed to get you know, keep our helpline up and running for a few more days. Whatever it is, those small pieces of hope and good news, it's really important you report them back, because that's why people will donate again or will contact you again, because they think, okay, this is working, we're achieving something. So think about the hope and the good news and tell those stories as well. It's good to contact a journalist and say, look, we're a local charity, we're launching a crowdfunder. But it's also great if they don't pick up on that, to go back 2 days later and say, hi, we just raised £10,000 in our area for this issue. Sometimes those stories of hope and momentum will be what cuts through. And I just wanted to reflect on the fact that this is a movement moment. This is a moment where all of us are realizing that we need to work together and do our bit. Big national charities, small local charities, institutions, we are going to get through this together, and the things that make a movement successful, knowing your values, working together, contributing your part of it, is what will pull us forward. And this stuff will also be beneficial to you ongoing. How you're communicating with your supporters, how you make contacts with local media, how you make sure you have clarity over your sense of purpose. All of these things are going to help you not just in the next few weeks, but in the months ahead. So take the opportunity and do some of that thinking now. Remember what I said at the beginning, it's about having clarity about what you're doing and your purpose, knowing your audience, who it is you really need to try and communicate with, and thinking about how you're going to cut through the noise with really clear, direct communications. So just to wrap up before I hand over, this is sort of the checklist of some of the stuff that we've covered. Think about resetting your priorities. Where can you be uniquely and usefully helpful in this moment? Connect with people on the right channels, but with strong boundaries, especially for your team. Really think about how you're going to look after each other, not just in the days ahead, but in the weeks ahead, and how you're going to help each other be strong to get through this with good boundaries. Work with decision makers if you can, and that might be unusual coming from a campaigner, but in this moment we need to try and find solutions together, as well as highlighting where the need is. Ask for help. There are people out there that want to help you, so ask for help clearly and directly as you can. Be specific about what you need. Reach out to your supporters, and don't forget email. It's a really great tool to try and communicate with people. Another little tip on that is, if you have a small email list, one of your emails that you can ask is, please forward this email to a friend and ask them to sign up, because we're going to need more people helping us right now. Focus on local media. I think for small charities that is really going to be how you cut through, and national media will pick up on some of those local stories too. And keep sharing the hope and keep sharing the good news, because we're all going to need that for momentum to move forward. And supporters want to support charities that they see are really making a difference. So if you can communicate how you're helping, how you're making a difference, that is going to help you. Okay, that is a lot of talking from me. Final point, if we remembered at the beginning, remember at the end, keep taking deep breaths, keep taking just brief moments to pause and reset yourself, and check that you are on track. And on that note, I will hand over to Lydia, if she's still there, who I think is going to kind of share some thoughts from Lloyd's on this. And we've got time for Q&A for people that want to hang around and do a bit of a Q&A. Post in the chat or post in the Q&A as well. Okay, sorry, Lydia.
No, that's all right. Thank you so much, Kat. I think it's like incredibly helpful and clear and concise. And I'm also really aware for people that we covered a lot there, and it was a bit of a whistle-stop tour. And that we are determined to keep supporting you with what you need, and that probably at the minute that is some headline, okay, take a minute, take stock, what should we be thinking about? But we hope to continue to sort of like develop our offer of support over the coming weeks and months as the situation develops, and develop accordingly. So I'm aware that it is sort of 5 to 12, so we've been going for a while. So I want to take just 5 minutes to talk through, for those of you that are our existing grantees, what we're going to be doing as a funder to help support. And I also have got a handy interactive poll to ask you if there are other things that you need or want that we can try. You know, we could potentially have another webinar up and running by the end of the week if there was something that we knew a lot of people were like, actually we'd like more detail on the media piece, or we'd like more detail on how do we set up online fundraising, some of those things. So I'm going to ask you that in a minute. In the meantime, the Q&A function is now live. So if you have questions for Kat or for the foundation and for me, feel free to start typing them, and we'll come back to them in a minute. But just briefly, if you are a grantee, we will be setting out, so if we're thinking about what we're doing as a funder to help you, On Thursday, we'll be sending out our grantee newsletter. We have completely rewritten the newsletter as planned, and it is going to really be setting out all of the different things that we're offering and ways in which we can support people. We've particularly, we just want to make really clear, you should have heard, but in case you haven't, we are wanting to make our funding as flexible as possible, particularly around if you have upcoming monitoring reports or you're needing to like move payments, you want to front load some of that money, we want to be as flexible as possible. So you can speak to your regional manager about that, or this link, we have a page specifically on coronavirus now, which if you go onto our website, there's just a link for that on the homepage, and that sets out everything we're doing in terms of your grant and things that you need to know. So hopefully that answers that, and if not, your regional managers will be able to pick that up with you. Kat, can you just go back? And we're also going to be increasing our enhanced support. So we offer a set of developmental support on top of a grant, and we are definitely going to be extending that and developing a specialist sort of coronavirus set of offers. So including some stuff around developing extra tech support. We know that this has fast-tracked digital transformation for a lot of people, and we're all working out exactly what that looks like. So we're going to be looking at making more equipment available and think about how we can support with some of that online and tech work so that you can get services up and running. Some work around, as Kat has said, it is important to take a deep breath, to think about boundaries and overwhelm. So we're going to be offering some specialist support around resiliency and staff and volunteer wellbeing and how to build that, and coaching and mentoring support for those of you that need like an external person just to process this and talk some of this through and about what that means for your organisation. We're going to look at some stuff around financial management and including cash flow forecasting, how to budget in a crisis, potentially some stuff around fundraising. So the whole set of stuff that we're looking at there, because we recognise that particularly for small charities there can be real challenges around income with things not being so certain and not being clear necessarily exactly what the government support might look like as yet. Some stuff around HR guidance, including staff wellbeing, but also what to do if you can't keep your staff on, and some peer-to-peer brokering. So we've already started when charities are letting regional managers know that something is going on, and regional managers know that someone else has got a similar challenge or has come up with a good solution. We are just trying to match make a bit. So if there are things that you've got questions about or you would want to be put in touch with other organisations, we can help do that. Are you okay to click, Kat? Next slide. Thanks. There are a couple of other things we're doing to help you. So we are wanting to monitor what you need and amend our offer as the situation develops. So what you need in this initial 2 weeks might be slightly different to what things look like in 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 12 weeks. And so we're going to keep reviewing what's going on and offering relevant support. We've been lobbying government for a better deal. So there was the Everyday Counts campaign trying to get the government to provide bespoke support for charities, because we recognise that charities are losing income. And whilst the current government package can help some people, it doesn't help if you are needing to keep your staff on, for example. So there are some particular challenges there. So do join in with that on social media if you want to. We've been writing MPs, helping charities to get regional press. If you are interested in that, let us know. We can try and help broker some of that for you as well. Doing things like this and developing webinars and really trying to understand what else you need to know. And that is a quick run through, but particularly we would like to, we know that everyone is being inundated by surveys. I had one charity that had 8 surveys already asking what help it needed. So we're not sending out a survey to our grantees, but we have got a poll here, which it would be really helpful, which is just 2 questions that I'm going to make available live in this, if you would be willing to just indicate what you want. So I'm going to launch that now and you'll be able to see it, and I'm just going to talk you through. So the first question is asking you to indicate which of the following offers of support you might find helpful in the short term. So by that we're talking about in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and asking you to choose your sort of top 5 priorities. So that might be more of this, more crisis communications content and support, some work on how to run effective online meetings and digital facilitation, help to understand or access the various online or mobile tools and the different channels that Kat was talking about earlier, and knowing how to choose the best one. So a more detailed overview of what's available and how to pick what works for you. And some support to build some virtual income streams through engaging supporters effectively. For example, building an Amazon wish list, setting up crowdfunder, virtual fundraising events. If you have set some of those things up and set up pages and crowdfunders, would you want us to help signpost people to that and to try and build some traffic for that? So building online communities of supporters, relating to local national press, tying into local decision makers. For example, the new government hubs that they're setting up, would you be interested in support to help do that? And working to amplify support in your voice of decision makers and media on specific issues for your service users, or other things. And if there are other things, please do pop them in the chat. And then secondly, some broad questions about, in the medium term, next 3 to 12 weeks, which of these are the most important for you. So I'm gonna just pause for a minute and let you fill that in, and that will help directly inform our offer. And then I'm just gonna we'll give you our contact details so that you can pick up with us. And I am gonna be making myself available for some direct support in a minute, but I'll talk you through that in a moment. Thank you to those of you who are popping things in the chat as well as other things that would be helpful. That's really useful. Great, thanks to you who already did. We're just going to let other people fill this in. Half of you have completed your voting now, so. I also hope you can't hear my neighbour singing very loudly in the background. The joys of home working. Great, I think we're about 2/3 of people have voted, so I'll just give you another moment to do that. Thank you everyone for bearing with us. Okay, I'm going to, that's going to stay live for another 3 minutes, but I'm going to keep talking now because most people have completed it, but do please keep filling it in if you've not already. I've got one more slide and then we're over to questions. Two more, skip through. So thinking about specific support around influencing and comms. So obviously you filled some of that in terms of your priorities, which is really helpful and will inform what we do in terms of quick turnaround. My job at the foundation is to directly support charities to influence effectively. So I have also set up a new sort of rejigged my work completely, and I'm going to be available for daily bookable calls. So if you have got a question, which might be like a one-off question, or it might be, oh, we've got a bigger piece of work, we're curious about this, you can ring like Kat. I am an experienced campaigner and community organizer who also worked on the ground at Grenfell, so also have a degree of experience in some of similar, not similar, but crisis situations, and I'm able to help particularly with that piece around getting organized. So thinking about prioritizing, what are you doing, how are you thinking about that, developing some of your internal and external crisis comms, planning how to engage with decision makers, and potentially linking people up. So if you're wanting to be in touch with local mutual aid groups, you're not sure who that is, we can help with brokering some of those contacts or local hubs, or tying in some of the government piece as that emerges. introducing people to journalists if you've got questions around who you want to be targeting, and media support. Can help with thinking about building your online networks and organising supporters and volunteers. And also we have a small pot of money available for people who are wanting to do particular targeted pieces of influencing in this moment, and saying, actually, we've got an issue, we need a little bit of extra cash that's going to help us just be able to engage with decision makers on this one thing. And if you think that might be useful for you, you can book in to talk with me and we can talk that through, or you can talk to your regional manager, because we also have a whole host of sort of consultants and people in place who, if there's a longer term piece of work that you need, we can help doing that. So that is that. And the way to book time or to book a call, I think, rather than trying to do everything on email, is I have set up a link using a website called Calendly. So if you just go to calendly.com/LRYE, so LRYE, then you can just select a time and it will automatically book it out of my diary. So that is your time, and then we can book in and have a phone call, or a Zoom or a Skype or whatever platform you are using and that works for you. Okay, so thank you. That is our quick rundown. I'm going to pass over to Kat, and we're going to move on now to some questions, really. And so if you have got questions, then we're going to try and answer them. So we've finished our sort of like formal contact delivery. If you have, but if you want to stay in touch with us, or you want us to put you in touch with Kat after this, we can look at some of that and thinking about what the best way of doing that is as well. So Kat, do you want to take us through questions? Have you been?
Yeah, so I can see a few questions in the Q&A. There's been some in the chat too. If I can see them, I'll see them. There's quite a lot of comments in the chat, so if I miss them, I apologise. But on the Q&A, I see Alice is asking about top tips for Facebook posts, and linked to that, saying that images are really difficult for them to use because service users lack the capacity to consent. So I'm not a Facebook expert, but particularly on images, one tip that I would suggest is there's a great free tool called Canva. I'll type it out in the chat. This is a really easy to use tool where you can make images very clearly, and you could do graphic images. So if you can't use, I mean like text images. So if you can't use photos of service users, you know, could you just do some like bold, clear, this is what we're doing, this is what we need. I think Bloody Good Period have done some really good, just like simple graphic typography images, and Canva is a really great tool for using that, and they give you to them as like exact Facebook size, exact Twitter size. Very useful. You don't need any design skills. And with Facebook posts, you might want to think about whether you great, people are putting links to some free images sites in.
And we'll send a link to Canva and other things afterwards as well, as is helpful in the follow-up email to this.
Yeah, great.
It's a whole set of graphics specifically for coronavirus, so you can design graphics and stuff. So they've put a whole new package on for free there.
Yeah, I realised I put Canvas, I mean Canva as the link, so canva.com. So I hope that helps a little bit. With Facebook posts, you might also want to, if you have some budget, think about like a little bit of promotion on them. I'm not really an expert on that, but it might be something to experiment a little bit with. There's Forward Action, who are a great digital organization, put up a really useful blog on their site with a lot of tips around how to do a bit of digital fundraising and digital comms in this period. So check out their website, Forward Action, and their latest blog has a lot of really useful tips on that. Tips for driving a successful crowdfunder. So my main tip would be to use that structure that we went through on the call around setting the scene, outlining the crisis and the urgency, being specific and tangible, writing something that's very clear, very direct, that answers, you know, how is this money going to make a difference, as specifically as you can, matters. I would also think about setting, rather than asking for thousands and thousands, set a smaller amount that you can always increase if you're successful, and people like to see that momentum going. in terms of sites to use, I know there's loads. I know that GoFundMe does not take commission. So anything you raise on that site, you get straight away. So thinking about what site you're using and whether they take a commission or not, and making that as good for you as you can. If you use GoFundMe, I know they're trying to promote as many as they can. So John Coventry is on Twitter. He works there. If you're on there, if you've got a crowdfunder, just tweet him and say, hey, I've set this up on your site, help us, you know, just putting it out there and asking for help. If you set up a crowdfunder, email it to your supporter list so that you can show them this is what we're doing, we need your help, and then think about other influencers, particularly local influencers that might promote it for you. Anything from you, Lydia, on that one?
No, sorry, I got lost.
No, it's right. You're looking through the comments. So, yeah, no. There's some questions around online fundraising. I'm gonna maybe like bump that as a sort of a follow-up, because I'm not so good on online fundraising. Yeah, other than kind of,
and that is, if that is something that you've wanted, you've indicated, we can definitely, and I think probably will look at developing something specific on online fundraising to be helpful.
Yeah, there's a question here from Helen about communicating the needs to replace lost funding rather than like new funding. So with that, and again, we're all learning as we go here. From a comms perspective, would be to really think about explaining what your need is. Like, your funding to stay afloat right now is because you're giving like a really important need to a group of people. So hone in on what that need is. You know, we've been providing, you know, a helpline for X, Y, and Z, or we've been providing these services for this really important group of people for the last 3 years. We're at a point where this need is more important than ever before, but we're not going to be able to sustain it in this current crisis unless we have your help. So kind of, even though it's you're talking about a gap of cut funding, you're still talking about a need that you have in this situation for people. So I think don't be afraid to be honest about that, but be really clear as well about, you know, how that money is going to help people in need, and continue a vital service that you've been providing for the last few years. That would be my sense of that. There's a question here, Lydia, that I don't really know what to say about using reserves, or, you know, dipping into reserves, or trying to fundraise to keep 3 months of reserves going. And I don't know if you've had discussions with other charities about how they're dealing with that in this situation.
Yeah, that's something that we're looking at, and particularly what that means in terms of developing some budgeting and short-term cash flow forecasting and how to think about that. And yes, it is, the specific question is it okay to fundraise if you've got reserves? And the answer is yes, it is absolutely okay to fundraise if you have reserves. So please do fundraise. If you have particular questions about your reserves and budget, speak to your regional manager and they'll be able to discuss some of that with you in more detail. But we are developing a specific package on this that will go live in the next few weeks. But I would say, if in doubt, fundraise. It doesn't hurt. We don't know how long this is going to be going on for. And so, yeah, do fundraise. It's good to have reserves, of course it is. It's like incredibly helpful, and there is a time to use them, and it may well be that this is it, but because we don't know how long this is going to go on for, what this is going to look like, I would encourage you to keep fundraising. But if you have questions, speak to your regional manager.
Yeah, and I'm just looking through the chat, and I'll just kind of respond to the questions I see. Sorry if I missed some.
I've noted a couple of questions here that people asked earlier on as well, Kat.
Okay, I'll come to you. I just saw this one that links to that last question from Sam from Refugee Resource about, you know, you're not being in an immediate crisis, but obviously you know that you're going to lose some funding going forward because you had events planned and so on, and how to strike the balance between not piggybacking on the immediate crisis, and being honest about like the future needs. You know, I think last week I was sort of in a bit of a meltdown like many other people, and what I've seen this week is there's a lot of people trying to get back to some semblance of business as usual, trying to continue, even businesses, you know, trying to run some of their services online and webinars and so on. I think everyone, and you are charities, you are doing this like vital work, so you need to be honest about the need and what you need. I've heard of people trying to think of creative ways where they could still do fundraising events. So are there at home, you know, if they were going to do it, if it was a fundraising run that was coming up next month, are there at home fitness challenges that you can do and people can chip in and donate to? I think it's about being honest, and it's also about being really respectful of people. There will be some people that just simply aren't able to donate, that would have donated before because they are, you know, experiencing their own financial difficulties right now, but there are also people that maybe wouldn't have donated before and but are able to, and are seeing that there's needs. So I do think just being honest and making other plans, but continuing to kind of fundraise and put that out there, because we need small charities and we're going to need you more and more over the months ahead. That would be my take. Lydia, do you want to go through other questions that you saw? Or
yeah, so some basic questions. So will we share slides, and how quickly will we share slides? We will try and get them out to you today. I think is the hope. With this, we recognise that this is a fast-moving situation, so we want to try and follow up as quickly as possible. And I'll also try and include as many of the links that people have shared as to things people find helpful in that email. There was a question, Kat, about how do you balance the immediate and long-term priorities when you don't have the mental bandwidth to do that? And when everything is sort of, I'm assuming because everything is busy and there is right now. Do you have any thoughts on that urgent, important balance?
Yeah, I don't have like a magic bullet, I'm afraid. I do think that looking after your staff as best you can and trying to just keep taking those deep breaths, take it day by day, week by week, and try to really set boundaries for yourself so that if you are overwhelmed, you know what your priorities are as an organization, and any incoming stuff that doesn't relate to that, forgive yourself for not replying to every email, for not answering every telephone call. You're not going to be able to. Set your out of office up so people understand that. You know, I've not replied to emails for like 3 weeks, a month, and had to apologize. So just try and set some boundaries. And maybe it's about, if you have, depends what your team capacity is. It might be one person, it might be two, it might be more. You know, try and see if you can kind of trust that you're going to think about this stuff, so I can think about this stuff, and it's a time to have real trust in your team. And I think also ask for help. You know, that might be that maybe funders can help you thinking through some of the long-term stuff, so you can kind of have some space to do the immediate stuff. There isn't a magic answer to this. I know it can be really stressful, but I do think one thing is that in the weeks ahead, you staying healthy and you being in a position to show up to do the work matters. So thinking about those boundaries, forgiving yourself and showing yourself kindness that you can't get through everything, and partnering where you can. Are there other organizations that can offer some of the stuff that you would, you know, that you know your service users need? Can you signpost? Can you direct? And can you try and focus down what to do in this moment? And Lydia, I don't know if there's anything you chip into that.
I think take a deep breath, recognize what you can do and what you can't do. As someone who has burnt out as a result of doing some of this crisis stuff, like, burnout is real, and it is okay to say, actually, I do not have the bandwidth to think about all of these things. What I can think about right now is this, and this is a time, you know, even if it's, and I will review this on this date, what's possible and what's not. And I think just being clear with yourself and with other people, and recognizing that actually there are a whole army of people that want to help right now, which in and of itself can be overwhelming if you feel like you're being inundated with offers of help. But that, yeah, if you've got particular challenges that you want to talk through, and you need to carve out a little moment to do that, I'm happy to have a call and have a chat if that's helpful. But likewise, take a deep breath. Yeah, and recognize that you can't do everything, and in this moment that is okay. Yeah.
I saw as well someone saying about if you're asking for help from other partners and they're overwhelmed too, how do you do that respectfully? And I think the only thing you can do is just be short in your requests and specific as possible. So get to the point and be very specific. So it's a very quick yes, no for someone to kind of figure out if they're able to help or not. And maybe also look to new partners that you might not have considered before. I saw, you know, Ralph Lauren, a luxury clothing manufacturer, has teamed up with Girls Bakery to get food out to certain NHS hospitals recently. So there are kind of companies that aren't doing their normal day-to-day that want to help, and especially if you can kind of think very specifically what they could do for you, there might be different partners you could reach out. I'm just looking in the questions. There's a question about grant staff being furlonged and projects not going ahead, and I think that would be something to discuss on a case-by-case basis with the funder.
And some of that will be covered. So charities are included in terms of the Chancellor's offer around saying that they will pay a certain amount of salaries from a certain period of time for staff that people want to sort of like pause temporarily but want to retain. If you have questions about that, speak to your regional manager, and certainly if you are concerned about funding and finances, speak to your regional manager. They are busy, so they will, it might take them a little bit longer than normal to get back to you, but they are definitely happy to work some of that through with you. And I think related to that, there's a question below that which says, do you think trusts and foundations will put a freeze on new funding? And I don't know about other foundations exactly what people will do, but I would say that the funding community as a whole is trying very hard to make more money available quickly, and to think about how best to support charities, not just in terms of funding, but in wider grants, and to lobby government around trying to get a good deal for charities. So there are a lot of conversations going on. And I certainly can't speak for all funders, but I think it is safe to say that all funders are committed to making sure that they are offering the most useful support that is possible, and will continue to do that, and we will certainly continue to do that. Yeah. And people are making short-term turnaround grants now. So if you've got an urgent funding need and you need something, speak to your funders. They will want to hear from you.
Is there any other questions that you think we've missed, Lydia, that you spotted?
There was one last question, which in relation to the communicating specific needs and asking for help, there was a question about, would that be too long to share on Facebook, where you talk through the step-by-step guide around what would be helpful? I'm going to assume the answer is no. Feel free to share on Facebook.
Yeah, definitely share it on Facebook. I think it's just things like, if you are writing that for like your crowdfund page, you've maybe got a little bit, you know, more, you can use a few more words. But if you're doing that as a Facebook post, like if you can get it down to like a sentence for each of those things, then you've got a neat little Facebook post there too. And also we're seeing, you know, Facebook post, and similarly I would also say an email can be kind of similar length as a Facebook post. You don't, you know, all of this stuff can be quite short and succinct, and the tighter you and shorter you can kind of get those points across, then the more impactful it will be. So that is the kind of information people want to hear to make them feel secure in kind of chipping in, donating, or helping. So you should be able to use that framework kind of across everything.
Great. Well done to the 62 people who have stuck with this for an hour.
I've just seen a last question about access to, where do you go about finding short-term turnaround grants, you know, and other funders than Lloyd's. So I don't know, maybe we can, I'm trying to share on Twitter when I see funders like saying that they've got grants going. I know Martin Lewis has set up a fund, and there's a few others. So I'm sure maybe Lloyd's is, you know, we'll all try and amplify information as we see it on Twitter as well, so that people can try and hear about these grants.
Yeah. And if you have a short-term influencing need and you're an existing grantee and it's a small bit of money, just contact me and we can have a conversation, or speak to your regional manager. Thank you as well to people who've talked about specific needs and things which would be helpful. So everything from trustees and support to remain corporate through to fundraising and a whole spectrum of things. We really appreciate you joining us. We know that you are busy. I think we're going to sign off now. If there are other things that you think of or that you would want us to be responding to, please do just be in touch. We'll send out contact details with the slides in the email this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for joining, everyone, and thanks for
and thank you,
so
Kat,
much
as well. Very, very helpful. We really appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thanks.
Tech support, who you can't see, but has been doing an amazing job.
Thanks, Helen.
Questions. Great. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Have good days. Take care of yourselves.
Bye.
Bye. I think, Lydia, do you need to stop recording as well?
Yeah, I'm going to stop recording, but I'm just wondering if I stop the overall thing, does that mean